Hello, and welcome to the fabulous world of the Comic Watcher Show, episode 80. I'm your host, Matt. With me, as ever, are Mike and Nick. Gentlemen, say hello.
Hello, everyone out there in Comic Watch Land.
Hello once again.
So we've got an awesome interview for you this week. We're going to be talking to Damien Wampler of the independently published book, not The Monitor, but just Monitor. I got my DC brain rolling there for a second. Monitor. But first, we've got a little bit of news before we jump into it with Damien. So, Mike, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, just real quick, and going to ride on that DC coattail thing. Got the Dark Knights Death Metal, which is new artwork. Greg Capullo is once again just killing it on those covers. That's going to be out June 16th, and they're also doing a cardstock foil cover, which is going to be so rad. So even if you're not a fan of the story, get it for the artwork, because the artwork is just awesome. That's on the website as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about DC Universe. They just debuted a new rewards program, which is kind of rad. Excuse me. And it's really easy. All you got to do is when you log on to DC Universe, you're going to go to My DC, which is on the bottom. And I think off to the right, when you look up top, you're going to see rewards. You click on rewards, and you'll see how many credits you have earned. You can earn credits through reading comics, watching videos, and watching snippets of videos, which I found out today, which was kind of cool. I earned like 10 points for watching a snippet of Batman Begins. Wasn't even a whole episode. It was like 15 seconds, which was kind of rad. But some of the rewards that you can receive when you interchange your tokens, just real quick, is a 30-day premium subscription. You got a Harley Quinn Supervillains enamel pin set, and they have some DC Artist Alley statues. You can get Harley Quinn, Batgirl, and stuff like that. So, and it's really cool. It's really easy system. You just say you click on the Harley Quinn Artist Alley statue, you redeem your code, and boom, there it is. So it's really neat. And anything that is shipping, they do warn about, obviously, the COVID, so shipping is going to be delayed. But DC Universe Awards program, kind of cool. Check it out. And I'm going to touch on Marvel really quick. Their online universe, Marvel Unlimited, is expanding yet again. Huge ton of books. You're going to have to go to the website, comicwatch.com, to check out all of the books, because they're going to do it in ladder form like they have been doing. But just instance, some of the books, Excalibur 1, they got Dead Man Logan number 12, which is going to complete the series for you onliners. New Mutants 1, just to name a few. Like I said, head over to the website, check that out, because there is just tons and tons of content that Marvel is adding. And really quick to finish up the news, I'm sure you guys may have heard, over the next 2 weeks, Marvel is going to have online digital releases only for right now. They did say that they will print these books at a later date, but right now it's going to be digital. May 13th is going to be the first release. You got Ant-Man 4, Avengers of the Wastelands 4, Ghost Spider 9, yay, Ravencroft 4, and then on May 20th, you're going to have 2020 Ironheart number 1, Spider-Man The Black Cat Strikes number 4, Hawkeye Freefall number 5, and Star number 4. Like I said, go to the website. We got the whole explanation of what Marvel is doing with these. They are going to print them at a later date. So check it out.
Awesome. Without further ado, we're going to dive right into our interview with Mr. Damien Wampler. Hey, Damien, thanks for joining us.
All right, how about now?
Hey!
All right.
Hi, everybody. Damien Wampler, ladies and gentlemen. To us all the way from Moscow, Russia, which makes you longest distance call we've ever had on the show. So technical issues, I'm going to, say, well, let's just take a pass on it. But hey, thank you for joining us this week. I'm Matt. This is Nick and Mike. And thank you, sir, for coming in and joining us. So, Damien, we're going to talk about Monitor this week, which came from Broken Icon Comics, and it's heady stuff. Very much in the Philip K. Dick vein. I don't want to steal your thunder too much, but why don't you tell listeners a little bit about Monitor?
Yeah, sure. Well, first off, thanks for having me on the show. It's a real pleasure to be here. It's an honor. I've never done one of these before, so go easy on me. No. Yeah, a little bit about Monitor. I love science fiction. I love Blade Runner. I love Philip K. Dick. And so when I wanted to do a story about privacy, I wanted it to be a sci-fi. I wanted there to be a lot of action adventures. So came up with this idea about this world where there's no privacy and everybody has monitors built into their bodies. So it's kind of like you've got your earbuds and your iPhone and your hard drive all built into your bone marrow, actually, is where it is. And you're online all the time. You cannot disconnect from the internet. And so the government knows where you are. The GPS tracker knows where you are at all times. It knows every text that you send, everything you buy, your blood pressure, your heart rate, everything is being monitored by the authorities. And then anybody who breaks this rule and disconnects gets hunted down by these police officers. These police officers have these guns that overload the monitors in your body, and you basically explode from the inside. So it's pretty dark. It's pretty intense. It turned into like a body horror. There's a lot of, people getting blown up and parts getting blown off. But I originally wrote it as an 8-page short story. I put all my energy into this 8-page pitch. I sent it around to different publishing companies, but I made the first 8 pages self-contained. So heaven forbid no publisher ever picks it up. I at least have this 8-page short story that has a beginning, middle, and end. So if you read the graphic novel, you'll see like page 8 is like this, where the big break happens and the heroes go running off, which could be an ending also. And then once Eric at Broken Icon Comics said, all right, let's make this thing, then I had to sit down and go, wait a minute, I got to take this 8-page mini adventure and turn it into a 100-page graphic novel, which was fun, but also a little bit daunting because I already have the stage, I already have the framework, and I had to build off of that. And so I built this adventure, and honestly, I kind of surprised myself because I wasn't expecting to add, biblical elements, and I wasn't actually expecting Pax to come back to life. Even my artist, she wrote me right when she got the rest of the script. She saw on page 9. She's like, "Wait, Pax is still alive?" And I'm like, "Yeah, he's still alive." So yeah, it was a trip. It was really fun writing it, and it was really fun working with this artist Elizabeth, who's in the Republic of Georgia, to draw it. And it's not everybody's cup of tea, but if you're into sci-fi and adventure, if you're into like Blade Runner kind of stuff, or if you're watching like Westworld right now or Altered Carbon, or The Matrix, like you're really going to dig Monitor. So
awesome. Oh, Nick, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, definitely. This was something that thank you for coming on the show. We've spoken before a little bit. You can check out, we've done an interview. I did the review. I'm still blown away with this book. I had to get my own copy. It just came in before the show. It was great timing. I picked up something in our interview where you had mentioned working with Elizabeth. There was a bit of a revision that happened kind of in the writing process that made you go back and look at that original 8-page short and kind of help develop the ending a little bit. I was going to see if you could maybe give some more insight on that story and that process.
Yeah, sure. So I already told you that I had the first 8 pages, drawn, lettered, and I had sent it to different comic book companies. And in the first 8 pages, the main character, who's, I guess he's the hero, but if you read it, you can make up your own decision whether or not he's the hero. But he kills 2 guys in cold blood. He points his little magnet gun and they explode. And then, so I got the green light to make this into a 100-page graphic novel. I didn't have a script. I had like a 2-page synopsis. Because, when you pitch to comic book companies, they want to see the first 8 pages and they want to see a synopsis. So I had a synopsis, but it's not like Eric at Broken Icon Comics was going to hold me to the synopsis. And a synopsis is a pretty thin framework anyway, right? I mean, there's a lot of room, a lot of wiggle room in there. So my initial synopsis had a lot of cloak and dagger stuff, a lot of double crossing. It was definitely a noir. I think there was something about space lasers in there, like orbiting satellites, and somebody had to get a key to it, which just so happened to end up in Altered Carbon season 2, if anybody's watching that. So I'm glad that I didn't put that in. So I started writing it. And Eric, the main character, is running around, he's doing his thing, and then I got this Facebook message from Elizabeth, and she's like, you know what? Shouldn't Talira be a little more upset with Eric at this point? And I'm like, I'm thinking back. I'm like, why would she be upset? Oh yeah, that's right. She just blew these two guys up. And so I hadn't scripted the whole thing. I had scripted about half of it. And so I figured, you know what? Why don't, instead of focusing on the plot about them, trying to escape and, the police trying to catch them, why don't I focus on the story, which is, how do you deal with the fact that you realize that you're a killer? Because this guy, he's a police officer. He's sanctioned by the government to do his thing, but really he's a murderer, and he slowly comes around to understanding that about himself. But that was not my original intention at all. But one of the things Elizabeth had asked me to do, she was like, you know what, he should probably apologize at this point, and they should probably become friends, and they should become kind of on the same team. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to let my hero get away with this so easily. If someone was born and raised to think a certain thing, they're not going to change overnight. And you see it in movies all the time. Somebody is like a bad guy, and then they switch sides. Or somebody like something happens and they change, and they see the error of their ways and they switch. And I'm like, you know what? I can't do it. Like, I can't have my character break down, say, I'm sorry, and then join the rebellion, right? I couldn't do it. And so when you read my graphic novel, like, my main character doesn't really, I held it as long as I could. I held the main character, I kept him from kind of joining the other side as long as I could, just to kind of buck the trends. When I'm writing, I try to throw out the first 10 ideas and go with the 11th, because the first 10 ideas have already been done. Like, somebody else has already done that. And even watching Westworld season 3, I'm like, oh my God, like, half of the things that I put in my graphic novel are now in this damn show. So you really gotta be creative and push yourself and not do what's already. It's so hard to not do what's already been done. But it's so cool these days that you and in indie comics, the writer and the artist can collaborate, and that's what happened with Monitor.
Yeah, awesome.
Actually, if I since we kind of ended on a note about the art, I was really taken aback by the coloring choices. I mean, Elizabeth's line work, don't get me wrong, phenomenal, very evocative, very much in the space of world building and realizing your vision for the story, I think. But the choices for coloring from, and I'm probably going to murder this last name, so bear with me, but Yuskevitz, just the gray tone accents, was that a deliberate choice on your part, or was that something that your artistic collaborators came up with?
That was something on my part. I was at the Jersey Shore, and there happened to be a comic book convention, so I wandered in, and there's this really cool comic book creator there. His name is Michael Bracco, and he's a middle school art teacher, but he also has a couple titles. He had a title with Alterna called Adam Rec, which is two-tone. It's like gray and orange. And then he's got this graphic novel series that he's totally funding himself on Kickstarter called The Creators. And that's also two-tone. It's like gray and like one other color. And so at the time, I had Monitor in my head, and I was at this convention at the Shore, and I saw his comics. I was flipping through. I was like, this is what Monitor needs. Like, it just hit me. And I'm so glad that I walked in that day. I was with my son. We're at the Shore. We're like, hey, comic book convention. They had like a full-size Optimus Prime outside. I was like, yeah. But but that's how I chose the color scheme, because of the creators. If you check that out, and you can just Google it, the creators graphic novel. It's got 3 volumes, but it's a really original color scheme. And I'm not going to do it with every graphic novel I'm doing, but for Monitor, which is such a dark, grim story, I thought, let's just do gray and one other color. But what's interesting is I had this idea, like, let's do gray and one other color. And I don't usually do color tests with artists, but for this one, I did. I sent the first page to like 5 different artists. Some of them did 1 panel for free. Some of them charged me. They were like, all right, you got to pay like whatever, $10-15. I'm like, all right, just whatever, because I want it to be good. And, most people drew the whole panel. They do a panel gray, and then they pick one thing and make it blue. Or they pick one thing and make it red or yellow. And it really didn't work. Like, your eye got drawn to the thing that they had drawn blue. And it kind of muddled the whole page, except for this one guy. And he was really, he was just brilliant. Like, if nothing needed to be blue, he wouldn't do anything blue. And if something needed like an outline, he'd do an outline. And, he just nailed it. So it turned out really, really beautiful. I think this is one of those where like the color really, really makes the book.
Yeah.
I could not agree more. It's just got such a unique look to it and feel. Mike, do you want to go ahead?
Oh, yes. I'm up. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, I was muted, then I was unmuted. So it sounds like from the beginning, Monitor was very organic as it became to take shape. What was, and diving into sci-fi with such a blank slate, what was your biggest inspiration and motivation for a story like this, and kind of just with the deep characters and not wanting to end so soon? It just seems like this was such a in-depth story to where you really had no preconceived notions as you were reading it, because you were just like, everything is smashed. I mean, that's just, this book is just so good that it kind of just, it really stands on its own. So was the process organic as it appears to be?
Yeah, well, so what I do is I always just take what's going on around me, whether it's something in the news or some story that I've heard. And when I find something that's really, really strong, I'll build a whole story around it. But you guys know I'm a U.S. diplomat. I go from embassy to embassy. I travel all over the world. So in the past 10 years, I've lived in Tajikistan, Republic of Georgia, Pakistan, Russia, and Zimbabwe. So I've lived in 5 countries in the last 10 years. Yeah, and so you hear tons of stories, like you hear great stuff. And also the work that I do with the embassy, I work in public affairs, so I'm bringing Americans overseas to like show other people what America is all about. And so you meet really cool people. I meet like filmmakers, I meet artists, writers, dancers, singers. So you meet all these really cool people. You hear all these stories, and I just take everything and I synthesize it and I digest it. And so my first graphic novel is called Savara, and it's this epic adventure that spans hundreds of thousands of years. And I just it's like the kitchen sink. I just threw everything into that book, which is why it's so horrible. Don't read it, please. But I think for Monitor, what happened is 2 things happened at the same time. I watched a really short documentary called Big Data. I think it's about big data, and it's really kind of like a short film that shows you how great big data is. Like, if everybody's wired, if little kids are wired with microphones, we can learn more about like how they learn language, and if everybody has a tracker on them, we can learn about traffic patterns and blah, blah, blah. So on one side, I was like, I saw this documentary. It was actually part of my job. We were showing it overseas. And I watched it. I was like, wow, big data is really cool. And then at the same time, I think probably like within a few days, I learned about Cambridge Analytics, and then I watched a whole bunch of YouTube videos and read news about Cambridge Analytics. And if you don't know what Cambridge Analytics is, you should definitely like go do research now, because the story is too incredible to believe, and it's evolved over the years. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but
oh yeah, I listen to a lot of NPR.
Yeah, it's just
I've learned some things.
Yeah, and so our world has changed for the better and for the worse. And so I think I took those two concepts and I pushed them together. I was like, okay, what's the best that can happen, and what's the worst that can happen? So I think that was my inspiration for, I think, the plot. Like when I get these heavy ideas, I take them and I try to make a story out of them. I'm a huge fan of American sci-fi, but I love anime too, especially Ghost in the Shell. Like I was in college when that was released in the theater, and so I remember like I've seen Ghost in the Shell and Akira in the movie theater like when I was in college. So that was like 90, but somewhere between like 91 and 95 and 99. Mm-hmm. So like seeing those on a big screen when you're like 19 years old, it's like, oh my god. So you'll see like a lot of Ghost in the Shell in Monitor also, but I think when you're writing, you've got the concepts, you've got like the plot and the world that you want to tell, but the characters, you kind of got to create your characters and then let them do what they want. And so in Monitor, I didn't know where it was going to end. I had the first 8 pages, but it was totally open-ended. Who survived, who died, where they went at the end. And so I just let them go, and I let the characters decide where they wanted the story to go.
Yeah. And that was one of my favorite aspects of the book, is it literally felt like you were just on a ride. And I mean, just page after page, you were just like, this, okay, so this is cool. Okay, so he's breaking away. So this is great. And you just found yourself just addictive to just, okay, more and more and more. So, but yeah, really great book. Yeah, Nick?
Yeah, definitely. I'd like to follow up on that, because it's kind of so different from what we've normally talked to, or how we feel like comics are made. And that there's this kind of strict script that gets sent to an artist, and then they draw it, and then it gets sent back to you. This what seems like it wasn't really that strict or that concrete of a process. Was it intimidating for the artist to kind of be on that step-by-step basis?
Well, I don't think so. So Elizabeth is really young, and she's really humble, and she's really open to criticism. And it's not like I'm a master myself, right? Like I make a lot of mistakes and I rewrite stuff. But we were kind of on this ride together, and I would message her and just say, hey, I think this works better. And she would be totally fine with it. She's never gotten mad at me and said like, oh my God, you're like micromanaging every aspect of my life. And occasionally like I'll find some cool link about drawing or coloring on YouTube, and I'll shoot it to her. So she's been great to work with. Elizabeth's an amazing person. So she's from the Republic of Georgia. I met her right when I was leaving Georgia, and she knew that I was into comics. She knew that I wrote, and she was like, hey, Damien, I got to show you my portfolio. So she pulls out some comics, and she pulls out her computer, and she shows me like a 100 or 200 page epic saga that she has written, drawn, colored, and lettered. And I'm like, wow, so what's your distribution plan? She's like, I don't have one. And I'm like, oh, okay, so you have a publisher? She's like, no. She has like an incredible drive to create, and she's just exploding with talent and ideas and no outlet. And so I flew out of the country, and then a couple weeks later I messaged her. I was like, hey, we gotta do this 8-page pitch, and then we put the comic together. So I don't know. I think it's good that we're both young, and we're both like, well, I'm not young, but I mean, she's young, and she's she's open to try new things. She's willing to experiment. And I think she knows that I'm willing to listen to her. Like if she has a good idea, like she'll message me and say, hey, I think this works better this way. I think this page could go better this way. But I think what was really cool about Monitor is, well, one of the mistakes I made with Savara was I hired an artist that was way out of my price range. I wanted to make something that looked like a Marvel or DC comic. And so to get that kind of quality, you got to pay, you know, a lot, like per page. And then when you're paying a lot, you got to be really strict. You can't just add a page, or you can't just add 5 pages. Like if you screw up your script, or you're like, you know what, this will work better this way. Like I couldn't afford to add more pages with Savara. Like I couldn't mess around. I had to scrunch it all in to my budget and then hit print. But what's cool about Monitor is Elizabeth's prices are a little lower because she's still a student. And so I was able to say, like, if I needed to add like 8 pages, I could do it. And you'll see in the graphic novel, like you guys know, like I'm pretty liberal with the big spreads, and especially at the end. So I didn't feel limited by space. Like I didn't have the publisher saying you need to limit it to 75 pages, and I didn't feel limited by money. And so if I wanted to do like a full page spread, I would just do it. And at the end, you know, if I'm like, all right, I'm going to do like 11 2-page spreads, you know, I'm going to do it. And so I felt really free, and I think Elizabeth felt really free also, which is why I love indie comics. I mean, I'm hoping, what I wanted to do is I want to give the reader something that they're not going to see in Marvel or DC or even Image or Dark Horse, right? I mean, like if you're going to pick up an indie title, you might as well get what you're getting, right? Like you're.
Yeah. We've talked about it a little bit, that there's like kind of different expectations when somebody picks up an indie book.
Yeah.
And like no matter what, it's still this comic medium, and it seems to flourish when there's this great collaboration happening and the synchronization of the writer and the artwork. And it seems like I mean, as a reader, you get that from Monitor. It doesn't feel like, you know, this is the writer's passion project who just, you know, send it out to different artists to do a job. It kind of feels like it's fleshed out in a way that it takes a team to do so. And yeah, you don't find that in a lot of places. I think that's where indie comics kind of shines.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. This book wholly feels like the product of an independent-minded, synchronized creative team that's just doing exactly what they want, with zero expectations of, you know, somebody else trying to put them in a box, and that's awesome. So I wanted to talk about you a little bit and your journey. I was reading your bio a little bit, and I mean it's very humbling, and it makes me feel very lazy about myself. But for our listeners, I mean, Damien's got a bachelor's degree in English and anthropology from Boston U. He's currently a diplomat. He's taught English for the Peace Corps. Just incredible. And now you're making comics in your spare time. Tell us a little bit about that journey. Like how in the world does comics fit into your story?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a good point. Because although I read some comics growing up, I really liked Dark Horse. Like I grew up reading Aliens and Predator and a couple Image titles. And growing up, Ghost was really my favorite comic. I don't know why, but Dark Horse, Ghost, man, something about that. I just loved it. I wasn't really big into Marvel and DC, and I didn't have a ton of money to buy comics. But growing up, I was really into photography, and I was also I loved English literature. I read a ton of books, and then I majored in English. So I was always a visual artist. I was always taking pictures. Started pursuing photography actually as a career, and was pretty serious about it. And I was really into theater. I did a bunch of student plays in college, and then I wrote and produced one play in New York City when I was living there. So like in my prior life, in my life before I started working for the government, you know, I was doing photography really seriously. I sold one one of my photographs to the Brooklyn Museum. I had a play on in a small theater in New York, and so that was the direction I was heading. It had nothing to do with comics. There was no comics involved. I was actually writing my next play, and I was, preparing to do some more photography. But I had done the Peace Corps. I'd lived overseas a long time, and I passed the Foreign Service exam. I became a diplomat, and I became a diplomat. I started my training in the summer of 2009, and like 6 months later, I guess, like January, February 2010, I find myself in Tajikistan, and I couldn't do photography really. I did a little bit of photography, but I couldn't really be a documentary photographer. I certainly wasn't going to be able to sell my photographs to National Geographic or something as a U.S. diplomat. It just wasn't going to work. And I had written this play called Savara, but there was no way I was going to produce it. It's just not going to happen. And I could have sent the play like to these playwriting competitions, where you then, if you win, it then gets produced. But like, if you're a writer, you have to be there. Like if some little theater in whatever, Chicago or Dallas or San Francisco is going to produce this play, like I have to be there, or at least pay everybody to do it. Like, so it just wasn't practical. And that was 10 years ago. And it just dawned on me. I was like, I still have all these stories. I'm seeing this cool stuff. I'm hearing this cool stuff. I have all these stories in my head. How do I get them out? And I don't know, it just, something clicked. I was thinking about my childhood and reading comics growing up, and my one comic book shop on Main Street in Newark, Delaware, Captain Blue Hens. I used to go there all the time. And I was like, you know what? I'll try to adapt this play, Savara, into a comic book. I didn't know anything about it, so I basically like inhaled a whole bunch of websites. Like Jim Zub, I read his entire website. Comics Tribe, which is like massive, right? Like there's so many subheadings in Comics Tribe. I read everything about writing scripts, about marketing, blah, blah, blah. I wrote this epic Savara graphic novel. I tried to pitch it. I had a whole bunch of people tell me like, this is ridiculous. Like I had a lot of people say like, you can't pitch, a 500-page graphic novel. Like you got to pitch something small. But luckily Eric at Broken Icon Comics, he saw something in it, took pity on me, I guess. And we made it, and I learned a lot. I taught myself this craft, made a ton of mistakes in the beginning as far as marketing and producing. But I think what's so great about Monitor is I learned so many mistakes, even about like how to name a graphic novel, to picking an artist to producing it. Yeah, that's how I got to here, and I've got more projects on the way. I've got a third graphic novel in production. It's called The Rum Running Queen. It's about a female race car driver and whiskey moonshine smuggler in Prohibition U.S.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's on the way. And then Elizabeth and I started drawing like a really personal like drama, fantasy drama. It's called Monsterly. It's about a family of half humans, half monsters who are living in this world that's like very anti-monster. Tons and tons of kind of like racism, but it's, speciesism. And it's this nuclear family that's just trying to survive. So we drew 10 pages of that. It's in an anthology, and we're looking for a way to get the whole. I've written 150 pages of it. The whole thing's probably about 12 issues, like 300 pages. So we're looking for a home for that because I want to work with Elizabeth again. She's so much fun to work with. And on that one, she did the color. And I'm doing the letters. So it's really cool. Just me and her kind of like, it's just like jamming, it's just like a jam session. So we're hoping to find a home somewhere for the rest of that project. It's called Monsterly. Yeah, like I said, we got 10 pages of it, or an anthology called the Guan Anthology. And then I've been trying to pitch the rest of the story, but with COVID-19, a lot of comic book publishers are just on like deep freeze, no shows anywhere. So I'm really grateful to you guys for chatting with me about Monitor, because like there's no conventions. I was gonna fly back, for San Diego, and my book was gonna drop it. It was gonna be at like Lexington, Huntington, a bunch of shows, and then nothing's happening. So it's a tough time, but I've got more projects ready to go.
That's awesome, man. I don't know how you find the time, frankly, but good on you for making it happen. Mike.
Yeah, I just kind of piggybacking on what Matt was saying. As far as like Monitor and stuff, what would you want people to take away from this? Is there like an awareness? Is there something, I don't want to say like a message, so to speak, but just being how deep and rich it is in the story with the characters and the environment? Like what should, someone take, or what do you want that reader to take away when they read Monitor?
Yeah, it's funny because I don't want people to come away with like a moral, or I don't want to preach to people. I want them to have a good time. I want to give people an adventure. I want people to be thrilled and on the edge of their seats. In regards to technology, just like the way Monitor was created, where I've got like a documentary about the good things about big data, and then this issue that shows the dark side of technology. Monitor doesn't give you any clear answer. Like when you get to the end of the book, you might not know who the hero is in the story. Even the publisher read it and was like, I kind of feel bad for the villain, right? And I'm like, yeah, right? Like, you get screwed. Yeah. And you feel it. So I think I'm not trying to have people come away with a lesson. I'm maybe just trying to have people feel an emotion, and it's up to the reader who they want to connect with. Some people might connect with the main character. There's a bunch of female characters you might connect with. You might connect with the villain or the bad guy, whoever he is. You might connect with Pax. I think it's easy to like hear about big data and read about privacy laws, and there's always like when a website comes up, it's like click if you accept the cookies, and you're just like click, right? Or like somebody loses their identity and identity theft, and you're like whatever. Like there's always articles about like Google is selling your data, and you don't really care, right? You don't really feel anything. And so I think with my book, I just wanted people to feel something for one of the characters. That was it. And it's up to the reader who they want to root for in the end, because there's a bunch of different teams, it's a bunch of different players, and it's up to you who you want to root for. I think almost everybody in the book gets what they want in some way or another. So it's kind of up to you who you want to invest your emotion in. But I just wanted to allow people to connect with the character and maybe see themselves in one of the characters.
Oh, absolutely. I think it even reads like, I would actually recommend this even to someone that's really not into like science fiction or deep science fiction and stuff, because it's just that good of a read, because there's questions, and like you said, there's good parts of technology, there's bad parts of technology, and reading this book, you find yourself. Well, I found myself going, okay, that's cool. Wait a second, go back a few pages. No, that's not cool at all. No, that's bad. No, But yeah, it's just I don't think I like got a message, but I think it was just a good time. It was just a good read, and like you said, just you can literally like pick a character and go identify with you. But then like I found myself, like I said, pages later going, man, not so much. No, because thanks, Nick.
Yeah, that's definitely cool, because in my review I kind of touched on it. Doesn't feel preachy. It just kind of feels like it's presenting all of these elements for the reader to find kind of what they're going to find out of it. And as deep into technology and sci-fi as it is, it was really the human element that kind of made the book really successful, in my opinion. That once the religious aspects started happening, I started to latch on to, this is the human expression, and kind of potential consequences of it just run amok, basically. And like, were there's particular human aspects that you were trying to definitely nail, or did they just kind of happen as a sort of organic process in that, because it comes through as a way that it's a technology-based story, but I'm finding myself latched onto the relationships and like the different actual human elements in it that have nothing to do with technology.
Yeah, it just kind of happened naturally. I just put the pieces on the board really early, and then I let stuff happen. Because, I mean, honestly, like, even though you've got this plot about, the whole world controlled by data and privacy is a crime, like, it's really about the people. And I don't spend that much time on the technology. I don't spend that much time on the data. I don't spend a lot of time with, like, long discussions about the implications of the data or anything like that. I just put the characters out there. I let them do their thing. I would say, it's great that you think that anybody could enjoy Monitor. I think for me, like, I know definitely some people are going to be turned off just by the genre. Some people like sci-fi, some people don't. For me, like, if something takes place in space, it's like, I'm there. Like, I'll watch it. I don't care what it is, right? Like, it immediately gets like 2 more IMDb points just for being in space. But some people like historical pieces. Some people want something set in, 18th century Victorian England. Some people want something set, someplace else. So, like, I'm hoping that maybe the guns and the technology and the flying cars are going to draw people in, but then they'll stay for the story and they'll remember it for the story. If someone really doesn't like sci-fi, I mean, I'm hoping they'll give it a shot. But if they don't, if they say, like, I'm not into flying cars and robotic dogs, I'm okay with that, because, every story that I do is different. I wrote to one reviewer and I was like, hey, do you want to read Monitor? They read a little bit of it and they were like, it's really not my thing. And then I said, you know what, my next book is about a young female race car driver and moonshine smuggler. And they were like, hey, yeah, when that comes out, send me that. So I'm totally cool with, people saying, hey, I don't like sci-fi, I'll take a pass. I'm fine with that, because I do the same thing, right? Like, when I'm flipping through Netflix, I'm like, hey, yeah, yes. That, that takes place in space, I'll watch it. That has airplanes in it, I'll watch it. All right, cool. Right? Like, that has a train, I'll watch it, That's fine. But yeah, it's really about the characters. It's really about the connections between people that's important to me. With every story, that's what's important to me.
That's super cool. It's kind of what happened to me, really. I opened it up, and within the first few pages, I was like, oh yeah, this is definitely for me. Like, I definitely want to dig into this. Like, the whole concept of a gun just transmitting this file to blow someone up, basically. It's like, that's super cool on this sci-fi level, but then there's also these human impacts that happen because you're still killing somebody. And I think like the story follows up on that so well.
Yeah, definitely. There's so much moral ambiguity here. Like the conversation that's had later in the book, killing versus deleting rogue data. I love that. I think it was actually my favorite scene in the entire book. I mean, and I'm kind of a philosophical debate nerd, so throw me in there. But it's also interesting to me that the deeper you get into this, like you were saying, the more morally ambiguous it becomes, and there is no clean-cut good guys, bad guys. I mean, when we're initially presented with the rebels, it's like, okay, they're the rebels, they're fighting against the system. Obviously, they're the good guys, but then the more you get to know them, there's some kind of creepy cult aspects going on there. Is that something that happened organically, or did you have that a little more planned out in advance?
It was all pretty organic, but I felt like as I introduced one element, I always felt like I needed to put like a foil or an opposite or a reflection. So like early in the book, there's a robotic dog. So I knew that like at some point there's got to be a real dog, like a physical dog. And so every time I added one thing, you know, I loaded up one aspect of society earlier on. As it progressed, you know, I knew that I was going to introduce new elements, and I kind of subconsciously made sure that there was a parity between the technological world and the world of these rebels who are living in the cave. But a lot of it was organic, I would say. There's just a lot of stuff floating around in my head, and it just kind of comes out. Yeah, you can't really plot this stuff. You can't really sketch it. You write it down, and then you review it, and you add to it or take it away. But I knew that I wasn't going to create a typical story. I didn't want to just create, you know, your straightforward action movie, action hero kind of thing.
Well, you definitely didn't. I mean, there's a lot of existentialism in there too. Right towards the start, like when Eric Maddox doesn't recognize his real face, it struck me. You know, he's like, "Oh, give me my face back, give me my face back," because he's, he's never seen his real face, and that to me is pretty damn deep. So, were there any like philosophical, other than Philip K. Dick, of course, but philosophies or anything like that you dug into for this story?
Well, just there's a lot of stuff going on right now where I don't think people fully realize the implications of kind of the digital world that we're getting into. I think when I was growing up, we always thought that we were going to enter like a video game world and we're going to have these avatars. But we're really close to this world of augmented reality where we're not going to know what reality is. We're only going to see like a digital veneer on top of it, which is really interesting because that also goes back to like Greek philosophy. That's like Plato kind of stuff, like what is reality? But now we've got like 3 layers of reality. You've got reality, then we've got the reality that we see with our eyes, then we've got the reality that someone is making in a computer and projecting into our eyes. So I think I was looking at some of the philosophy for like the ancient Greek, like how do we perceive existence? How do we perceive ourselves? Yeah, it's exciting. The future we're going into is exciting and frightening, and I wanted the book to have both, like the fright, the fear, the dread, and the excitement.
Well, I would say you succeeded. If nothing else, bot dogs seem very terrifying. But, Mike, go ahead. Mike.
Oh, sorry about that. Sorry. But yeah, no, the dogs were really great because I have a border collie mix and I'm tired of vacuuming up hair. So I would take a robotic dog any day, just as long as
Let me see if I can bring my dog on. Hold on.
Yeah.
Like, gotta have a pet here.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring my ferocious part timber wolf.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Real
Oh yeah.
Oh, so cute.
She hasn't had a haircut in 6 weeks, but neither have I, so it's all right.
There you go.
Right?
No, what about the robotic dogs? Actually, that was inspired by Boston Robotics and these dogs. You probably seen these YouTube videos about these robotic dogs that they're making that can open doors and they can run up hills and stuff. They're awesome, and I love them. And I'm kind of obsessed with the robot dogs. So I knew I was going to put them into some sort of story somehow. I really wanted to do like a comic book about robot dogs that are sent to Mars by NASA, and so NASA's like put like hundreds of robot dogs on Mars, but the Russians have put like robot bears or something, and so it's like we've got the robot dogs on Mars, the Russians have the robot bears. And there's no dialogue. It's kind of like, have you read Age of Reptiles? Old comic book series.
I'm familiar with it, but I haven't read it.
Yeah, that was a dark horse title I read growing up. It's about dinosaurs, but they don't talk. It's like a nature show. It's by this great storyboard artist, and it's just the dinosaurs running around, and the little dinosaurs are trying to avoid getting eaten. So that was my idea, Robot Dogs of Mars. I'm so glad that nobody greenlit that project, because that would have been horrible. But
I would have read robotic bears and dogs fighting on Mars. That's all day over here. Let me tell you.
Oh God. Yeah. It would have been terrible. It would have been good for like one issue, maybe.
From the Eastern Shore, we entertain very easily over here. So write the book. It's fine. At least you'll sell one. It's fine. Nick.
That's how I'll make my millions, right?
Yeah. No promises.
We need that 8-page short.
Right. Get cracking.
I'll call Elizabeth right now.
Got it, broken icon. Are you listening?
Yeah.
Yeah, you heard it here first for sure. Like that's gonna happen. No, like it is exciting that you have so much in the future that you're working on, and that Monitor is something you can really sink your teeth into for a while. Is that something that we're going to be able to do with your future projects? Are they kind of this in depth as well, or are you trying to maybe gear towards something maybe more just lighthearted and entertaining, or is this kind of the theme that you like?
Yeah, well, I mean, I want to tell stories that matter. I don't want to just do fluff. I don't want to just do robot dogs running around. So I really try to look at what's going on in the world, what the major issues are, and tell a great story that's important and moves people. I think as I'm learning to be a writer and as I'm growing, what I'm learning is that I need to simplify. And so my first graphic novel, Savara, was way too complicated. It's incomprehensible. There's like so much going on. Monitor, as you know, is pretty dense. It's pretty complicated. There's a lot going on. So my next project, The Rum Running Queen, I tried to simplify it. There's no flashbacks. That was one of the things as I was writing, I was like, no flashbacks. And I tried to make it simple. And I think I succeeded. It's much more streamlined. It's much more simple. It still has like a whole ideological battle. There's still really interesting philosophical stuff about resistance to government and what rights the government has on people. But it's a fun thriller noir. It's a crime thriller. And then Monsterly is even more simple. So it's as serious and it's got a lot of philosophy, but I'm just every work that I do, I try to make it even more and more simple, because my brain is crazy. It's going all over the place. There's a ton of stuff in here, but I realize that when you're presenting your stories to people, you got to make it. You don't need to make it dumb. You need to make it smart, but you need to make it simple. And so Monsterly is about this family of 4, and it's.
Oh, hey, we got him back.
Yeah, I'm back.
Nick, do you want to pick up?
Yeah, so we'll kind of start winding things down a little bit. Looks like our technical difficulties are wanting to pick things up. We've dug into pretty much everything in this book except the cover. I feel like that is a difference from what you see in the internal art or the internal pages. It's something that's very striking. I wanted to see if you could kind of just give a brief overview of the cover and kind of what went into that.
Well, so actually, I didn't have anything to do with the cover. I didn't have a cover working on the whole book. The publisher takes care of that. And so I had like a draft cover. It's really weird. I had actually asked a different artist to draw Monitor first. So I had worked out a deal with an artist to do the first 8 pages. He was like, I met him on Facebook, and he was like, yeah, I can actually do all 8 pages this weekend. Like, I've got a ton of free time, blah, blah, blah. So I sent him the script. I didn't hear from him for like 2 months. And then out of nowhere, he apologized. He was like, hey, I'm sorry. I dropped off the face of the earth, but I don't want you to hate me forever. I want to keep my word. So he did 4 pages, and he didn't ask for any money. He's like, these are free because I don't want you to like say bad things about me on Facebook. I want us to be cool. So he sent me the first 4 pages. They're very, very different from Elizabeth's. But I had no cover, and so I took some of his art from those pages, and I kind of created my own mock cover. And I thought it looked pretty cool, but then the publisher saw it and they were like, Damien, this sucks. We're gonna make our own cover. But what's interesting is they kind of took that concept of like this police officer with the buildings kind of all around and created the cover. Yeah. And the cover is kind of like a dramatized version of one of the panels on page 3 where the cop kills the 2 guys, which is like the core of the whole book, actually. But yeah, the cover is frightening. So my publisher focuses on horror and sci-fi. And so for them, this is like a horror title, which it is. I mean, there's a lot of, really gruesome horror in this book. But I like the cover. I think this X-ray of those guys in pain kind of speaks to what's going on in the book, because the book has a lot of strong emotions. There's a lot of people in pain. There's a lot of people like in the fetal position crying. It's an emotional roller coaster. So I think the cover fits. This is an indie book, but at the same time, I've got a publisher behind me. They've got a ton of great titles. Of experience in the business, and they gave me some tips before I sent it to print. Eric and Nicholas, they gave me some advice. I made some edits, and so it's nice to have a publisher behind you. So it is an indie book, but I did have some guidance from them, which is good.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm curious. You're based out of Moscow right now. Yeah. Without getting too far off of the comics path and into the world of geopolitics, what's your experience living in a more authoritarian atmosphere like that? How did that inform Monitor?
Yeah, so I started writing Monitor when I was in Georgia, but I was finishing it up. I was finishing the script, and we were pretty well into the art when I moved to Moscow. But I finished the book when I was living here in Moscow. And Moscow has there's no privacy in Russia. Russia has laws that basically say that all of the data from all of the telephone and internet companies can go to the government, like before you've done anything wrong. I mean, in America, I think like you need a warrant, right? Like the police need permission to look at your data. In Russia, the government has it all already. So I think that just kind of like, that was like the final nail in the coffin. Like, I'm writing this graphic novel about a world with no privacy, and the next thing I know, like I'm in a country, 200 million people, largest landmass in the world, largest country in the world, and there's no privacy here. So I think that's kind of like, it's chilling, it kind of like sends shivers up my spine to be like finishing this graphic novel. I was doing the letters, I'm sending it to the publisher from Russia. I think it was like irony, it was like perfection, really, really fitting to have this, to be living here. This is like the case study. This is like, this is, if Monitor was going to happen somewhere in real life, it would be in Russia probably first. So,
ooh,
yeah,
that's pretty chilling.
Scary.
Mike?
With the work you've done so far, what would you say would be your one mantelpiece, your one flagship, that one project that you're most proud of that you have done so far?
I'm really proud of Monsterly, which you can read 10 pages. like I was saying before, I've been trying to simplify. And so Monsterly is all about these little vignettes where somebody has to make a decision, and they have to make a hard decision. Oftentimes they make the wrong decision. So I'm most proud. I really like the 10-page story that I have, and I really like the script that I'm working on. So I hope it comes to life. So for me, I'm always looking at the next thing, because I'm always seeing the faults in what I've done before, and I'm trying to move forward. I'm really proud of Monitor. I'm just psyched at how it turned out, and I think like if those last like 12 pages don't blow you away, then like I'm sorry, I've done my best, right? Like because I threw everything into this book. It's really a labor of love, and so I hope people enjoy it. But I don't have that many titles under my belt. I'm gonna keep working. I don't sleep all that much. I'm always working on something else. So I hope that I can just keep surprising people. Every project that I have is very different, and so I'm hoping that people can either hate one book that I've written and like the next one, or maybe they'll, when my third graphic novel comes out, maybe you can read them all at once and see how very different they are, but then also the threads that are, common to all of them. But I'm just trying to surprise people and entertain and shock and have fun. In indie comics, you can just have fun. You don't have that editorial oversight, which is it can lead into trouble if you're inexperienced and you can't rein yourself in. But I think with Monsterly, what I'm working on now, I think I can. I think I've gotten to the point where I can tell a great story, the story that I want to tell.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we all agree that we're pretty eager to see what comes next, and not for nothing, but Monitor leaves the door open just a crack for a little more from that world. So any thoughts?
That's really, really hard. You've seen what I've written in the interview. Sequels are hard. Sequels are really, really hard. In Hollywood, so few people have done them well. In literature, it's like Dune is great. Dune is the greatest book ever. And then you got Children's of Dune and Heretics of Dune and all the other. It's just like, all right. It would be hard. So although of all of my books, I think Monitor would be really easy to turn into a sequel, but I don't want to retread what I've done before. I think it would have to be something very, very different. I don't know. I need time. Writing, you need a lot of time to just let things sink in, and maybe something will pop out at me, and we'll see. It's got to be right, though. I don't want to do it for no reason. I want to have a good story to tell. I mean, Monitor is kind of like taking the Old Testament and like throwing it into a blender and adding robot dogs. So I'm very tempted to do like one of the a book from the New Testament and keep with the biblical allegory and do like a Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but in cyberpunk. But at the same time, it has to feel right. Like I don't want to just do it for the sake of doing it. It has to come to me. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
That's awesome. Well, we've about come to the end of our time. So Damien, thank you so much for stopping in. I know it's kind of late for you over there. I appreciate you taking time to make it happen, technical difficulties aside. So this has been episode 80 of the Comic Watchers Show. I'm your host, Matt. With me, as ever, are Nick and Mike. Our guest this week, Damien Wampler. The book from Broken Icon is Monitor. You should check it out today. It is available for purchase on the website. Broken Icon website, I should say. So that's it for us this week. We're available on SoundCloud, Spotify, Stitcher, all those good places you can find podcasts. And we are, of course, part of the Comic Watch family. Thank you and good night.